The Denver Broncos might not necessarily be in the wide receiver market, but San Francisco 49ers wideout Brandon Aiyuk wants a new home. Could Denver be a place to entertain? We'll take a look at that and much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into yet another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. There's trade drama going around in the National Football League as San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk wants out. Now, with all the potential destinations, why might Denver be a place that could pop up into the inquiry? Or is Denver going to find themselves in the market for Aiyuk? We'll break all that down and much more in today's episode of the show. Real quick, thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day, whether you listen to us for free, wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. We're your friends. Cody Roark, Sayre Bedinger, been hosting the show here for a long time. I work for Mile High Sports as a reporter. Sayre covers the team for predominantly orange.com as a longtime site expert for Broncos Country. So with that said, Sayre, let's open up the floodgates here, because the moment it was announced on social media that Brandon Aiyuk officially requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers, I started seeing the social media sphere say that the Broncos should trade for him. This team should trade for him. There's a lot of different arguments to be made as to maybe why they should or why they shouldn't. But I think when you look at it here, the most glaring first observation is that the Broncos might not be in the market right now to trade for a player like Brandon Aiyuk. Where do you sit on this conversation? And I'm excited to see how it goes and what rabbit hole we can go down here to maybe make arguments for or against.
Well, I think you could make a compelling argument either way, Cody. And obviously, when it comes to adding a star player to your favorite team, like that gets a lot of fans excited out there. But then there's also kind of those fans that are like, can the Broncos really actually afford this? Do they have the cap space? Should they be trading high draft picks to get a guy like this? Do they need a wide receiver? And I think, to me, the answer is not necessarily about these immediate concerns that come to mind. It's about the long term. And we talked about this, I think, off the air during the NFL draft, or at least I posted about it on Twitter. As soon as the Broncos drafted Bo Nix, I think they put themselves in a position to be able to make moves like this. And I saw on Twitter, Josina Anderson had reported, and I don't know, I guess you never know who's really calling behind the scenes or whatnot, but like the New England Patriots, she said, were interested. And you look at the Patriots and you think, why would the Patriots make a trade like this? Like, they're supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league. Isn't acquiring Brandon Aiyuk a win now move for some playoff ready team? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think he could work well in a situation where a team wants to win right away, or I think he could work well in a situation where a team wants to win from now on. Like, the guy's 26 years old. He wants a new contract, obviously. And a team like the Denver Broncos, they're going to get rid of that Russell Wilson dead money here in the next 2 years. So if you structure an Aiyuk contract in such a way, you would be able to fit that contract under the cap while you're still eating the Russell Wilson dead money, as well as add a premier playmaker who is only 26 years old for the quarterback that you just invested a first-round pick in. So I know that on paper it seems like, man, the Broncos would have to pay way too much. But to me, I think it's a lot easier to justify the cost as opposed to scoff at it.
Well, and I think in a situation like this, too, Aiyuk doesn't have necessarily much leverage as to where he wants to go. If I'm not mistaken, still on his rookie contract. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah.
So he is. So he's not going to be like, hey, I will only go to this place, or this place. Like, if he doesn't want to play for the 49ers, they could ideally send him wherever they want to. And so part of me wonders, does that become a Price is Right type of thing? I've seen different things floated out there. I think my hesitation against that, Sayre, would be if it requires the Broncos to send over a first-round draft pick. I don't know if I would want Denver to necessarily do that, just because we have seen a little bit of the frustration and what can happen when you don't have a first-round pick for, a year or two, even just 1 year. You're missing out on some premium talent that could be something special. And obviously, I think Denver's receiver position, the way it is right now, there's the whole thing going on with Courtland about him wanting to be paid more money. Certainly, Brandon Aiyuk at this point would probably command a higher average annual value than maybe what Courtland is seeking at this point. You have Tim Patrick, who's coming off of an injury, but has looked good in OTAs and so far on minicamp and is a reliable guy. You signed Josh Reynolds, who is a proven reliable option for the quarterbacks that have been throwing him the ball. We don't know what Marvin Mims is just yet, but we see potential in terms of his speed and his ability to get across the middle of the field. Right now, like I would say that Denver's in a solid position, but it's also, I could see at the same point too, is you look at Denver's roster, I can see it both ways. Okay, well, Denver's roster is in a solid position right now for Bo Nix right away as a rookie. A player like Aiyuk would be a great addition. You know what he can do in terms of being a game changer. He can attack the middle of the field for you as well. Is it worth it right now for the Broncos to make a move of this magnitude? To me, I don't think right now would be the move to it. But then again, things could change at this point in time. I think he's a great player. You made some great points about maybe what he could do for a young guy like Bo Nix. You need reliable playmakers to throw the football to. And look, if you have an injury or two at the receiver position, you're in dire straits. We don't know. Like, this is Tim Patrick's final year on his deal. Cortland Sutton, next year is the final year on his deal. So Denver's window is shrinking in terms of wide receivers, though I feel like in 2024, they're in a pretty good position to kind of stand pat and not really pursue a guy like Aiyuk. I mean, it's tough either way that you break it down. You can make arguments for and against it.
Absolutely. And it is going to cost draft capital to get a guy like this, right? I mean, either way, if you want a guy like this on your roster, you're not getting guys like Brandon Aiyuk typically in free agency. You're getting more so the guys like Calvin Ridley, who are 28, 29 years old or almost 30, right? And they're already done with their like second contract age. And so for Aiyuk to be even somewhat available, I know the 49ers have come out and said through Adam Schefter, like they don't plan on trading him and things like that. So, and the teams always say that, right? I mean,
yeah.
But the 49ers, I guess, do have a little proof. They didn't trade Deebo Samuel back in the day. So I get that, but different situation for them. There's a lot of dealings between the Broncos and 49ers in recent years. And I mean, John Elway traded with John Lynch, and George Payton has traded with John Lynch. And obviously we saw the 49ers and Broncos come together last year on the Randy Gregory trade. So it's something that, to me, there's relationship equity there. These teams know each other well, and they've done deals in the past. And so I just feel like the Broncos are in a position where, like you said, beyond this year, what does that receiver position look like? Do the Broncos, if they wanted Cortland Sutton around for the longer term, why not give him a new deal? All right. They've seemingly refused to do that up to this point. We'll see what the coming weeks bring. Tim Patrick, like you said, not under contract beyond this year. You've got Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, and then Josh Reynolds, who will be 30 next year. And so I just think that's an interesting discussion. It's not necessarily about, hey, can we fit another wide receiver into the 2024 plan? It's, can we fit Brandon Aiyuk into our long-term plan? And does it make sense to give up those future assets? To me, that's what makes this a deal worth making.
That's a great question. And also, I think a more likely scenario, if in fact any team, including the Broncos, were to trade for Aiyuk, it would probably be what happened when the Broncos traded Bradley Chubb to the Miami Dolphins. It comes with a, hey, sign me to an extension type of process, versus you're not just going to trade Brandon Aiyuk and say, all right, play out the year. We'll see how things go. It's more so going to be, I think, along those lines here, which makes things very intriguing. Broncos country, how do you feel about the Broncos maybe being in the market or not being in the market on a player like Brandon Aiyuk? Would you be okay with no draft capital or lack of draft capital for a year or two? If that is the case, make sure you let us know if you're listening or watching Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcast. And for you everydayers out there, look, there's another big storyline here for this team. Rookies have officially reported for a training camp. We'll look at some of the biggest storylines and what we hope to learn going into next week as well here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Broncos country, today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Denver Broncos rookies are in the building and reporting for training camp here in the 2024 offseason. Does Bo Nix coming a little early give him an extra advantage in this quarterback competition? Maybe it does. Maybe a potential running back one of the future getting back onto the practice field soon. Cody and I are going to talk about that and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. I want to thank every single one of you for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, wherever and however you listen to podcasts, or if you watch the show on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. And you know what? Stick around on YouTube. Go check out Locked On Sports Today with local experts covering the teams that you love, streaming 24/7, or you can check out Locked On Sports Today on the Amazon Fire TV channels app for free. So go ahead and do that. And Cody, look, I think, you know what? This is an exciting time for Denver Broncos fans because football is back in the air. The rookies are reporting for training camp. I wonder, as we kind of discussing this, we've been discussing obviously the quarterback position since I joined the show back in 2021 or whatever that was. But this is a different discussion. We've now got a first round pick in the mix. It sounded like Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham were kind of neck and neck a little bit there at the end of mandatory minicamp. Maybe Jarrett Stidham a little bit ahead of him. Do you think reporting early for the rookies, does that have any sort of weight towards this competition at all for Bo Nix?
I think it's a great question. I don't think it necessarily does because Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson also get to report early with Bo Nix. And so it's really like you need quarterbacks to throw to the various rookies, right? The rookie draft class, the undrafted rookie free agents, the young guys all reporting. I do think you might see a little bit of a different approach. I think this is where you see maybe a ramp up in installation. I mean, what the Broncos have already gone through in OTAs and minicamp, they've gone through installation. But I remember before minicamp even ended, Sean Payton told us that installation, like they're going to do some things different. They're going to start adding things onto what they've already established from a foundation. And this is where you really start to add more meat to the bones here in terms of what your offense, your defense, your special teams installation stuff's going to look like. And certainly for a guy like Bo Nix, that means, hey, I'm getting more information now thrown at me than I did prior. But I also still need to retain that prior information in terms of our install and our process and the offense and, this, that, and the other. I mean, the list is very extensive, like for what the quarterbacks have to go through. I don't know if, like Broncos Country, if you're listening or watching this, if you've had a chance to check out Hard Knocks on HBO, I always felt like in the draft process, when you're seeing Brian Dable, Joe, Shane, they're all meeting with these QB prospects. Dable's asking them questions on the whiteboard. Like that's just a little minute detail as to what really goes on in the installation. And right there, I feel like some people are probably watching and saying, wow, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. It sounds complex. Think of that times 10 here for when you talk about an installation process, which we all know for Sean Payton's offense, players have said, players that have played previously for Sean, it's not easy. It's complex. There's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of different variables that you need to have. But you have a guy like Bo who's smart. You have a guy like Jarrett Stidham who's super smart. I think anything that these guys can get by getting into the building a little bit earlier before the structured practices really begin, I think can benefit all of these guys here. And I'm curious to see once everybody else reports and then they start taking the field as a team, what does that look like? How does the offense move? To me, I think it could benefit them as well. But, there's also some other storylines here when we talk about rookies reporting. I mean, going to rookie running back Audric Estime, who missed OTAs, a good portion of it after having a knee scope procedure. I think all of us are trying to sit here and wonder, like, is he going to be ready for day one of training camp? Because that right there is definitely going to be a big element to the running back competition that you and I have really dove deep on here on the show in the last couple of weeks. That to me is, I think, where I'm kind of leaning as well in terms of the outside of quarterbacks is, all right, hey, is Audric Estime ready to rock and roll? Because Broncos Country wants to see him.
Yeah, and when the pads come on, I mean, he's going to make them pop because that's what he does best. He runs through people, and he did that very well at Notre Dame. I've mentioned on a number of previous episodes over 900 yards after contact last season alone at Notre Dame. So this is a guy with fresh legs who is very strong. He is aggressive. He will hit you, and he will run through you, and he will potentially complicate this Broncos running back. I don't think there's any question about it, Cody. After hearing Sean Payton say the team had a 3rd-round grade on Audric Estime, I don't think there's any doubt that he's making the roster. I don't see any doubt of Jaleel McLaughlin making the roster, the things that we've been hearing about him. This really puts a lot of pressure on the veterans once again. And Audric Estime being out there on the field, I think people are going to see how big he looks. We're going to, when you're out there at training camp to start off in a week or so here, I think we're going to see a lot of tweets. Man, Audric Estime just looks big. Even without pads on, he looks big. I mean, he's going to impress people immediately. And then when the pads come on, I think he's going to turn this competition up a notch. And so he, to me, is somebody that we didn't get a chance to talk about at OTAs and minicamp because, well, he wasn't out there, right? And the pads weren't on anyway. So I just feel like, man, if he's fresh, if he's ready to go, it is going to be a very, very fun preseason, watching him work out there, watching him get a chance to maybe carry the biggest portion of the preseason workload. I'm sure we'll see plenty of Blake Watson. We'll see plenty of Tyler Beatty as well. Don't know how much we're going to see the other guys. I'm very interested to find out what the Broncos' plan is to get all these guys involved so that it is, I don't know, I don't want to say even competition because that doesn't sound right, but because those guys have a lot of experience. Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, they have a lot of experience compared to these other guys, but I am very pumped for Audric Estime to get out on the field and show what he can do.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it might be a little easier to rotate a large portion of these backs because there's only a handful of them in comparison to the next position we're going to talk about. And it's these rookie wide receivers here. And mainly what I want to highlight here is like in OTAs and minicamp, because each quarterback, right, every team period, each quarterback got 4 reps. And within those 4 reps that each of those guys are getting, there's 12 to 13 wide receivers that they're rotating in and out. So it's for guys like Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, we didn't get to see too much from them in OTAs and minicamp, and everyone's trying to like, oh, like, is Troy Franklin struggling? Like, no, it's not necessarily the case. It's that, hey, like the reps haven't been as many as you maybe hope for because they have so many guys and they're rotating guys in at a quick rate, and you have a couple of guys standing out. Like, it's way too early, I think, to jump to that conclusion here. So for me, it's like, okay, hey, now that Troy Franklin is getting in the building, which the last day of mandatory minicamp, he caught a red zone touchdown pass from Jarrett Stidham. You love to see that. That's good momentum for him. But how did these guys factor in to the rotation where I imagine that when the first team offense, second team offense, third team offense, all of them get reps, I think it's going to be more than 4 plays per period. I think you're going to see that bump up to maybe 7 or 8 plays per offensive unit that you're going to see. And that gives these guys more opportunities to make plays. And look, I think that's going to be a huge storyline that we're probably going to have to cover almost every single day here of training camp. Like whose stock is rising, whose stock is falling a little bit. You have to make plays when you get on the field. Like this is one of those positions because there's so many guys, you can't afford to sit around and wait.
Especially because I feel like, Tim Patrick is probably going to be limited in terms of like, I don't know if he's going to just get every other day off or if it's going to be every 3rd day or what the case is going to be, but
probably the latter there.
Yeah, probably something like that where they try to ease, because the goal for Tim Patrick is to get him week 1 ready, right? And so when he's out, that's going to be an opportunity for these rookies to step up and make plays at practice. And we don't know, is Courtland Sutton, he's kind of said that a training camp holdout is still a possibility. I don't necessarily expect that, but he said that. So I don't think we're necessarily going to see that. But even with Sutton, like, I don't know, are we going to see him out there every day as he's kind of still ramping back up? He wasn't out there for all of OTAs, right? So, I mean, just those last 2 practices, and he was only I don't think he participated fully in the first one either. So it's, to me, you're getting to training camp and these veteran guys are going to get scheduled days off anyway, because they've already proven what they can do. That gives the coaching staff the opportunity to see Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, and these other players with the starting offense, with either Stidham or Nix and the starting offensive line. How do you fare against Pat Surtain? How do you do against Jaquan McMillan? How do you do running from the slot against, you know, Riley Moss if he's out there? How do you do on the outside? I mean, there's going to be so many different factors, but I think with Tim Patrick getting those days off, it paves the way because you feel like there's only one spot available, right, on this wide receiver depth chart. And so when Tim is getting his scheduled days off, that's the opportunity for those guys to come in and make a lot of plays and make an impression and make that case for the wide receiver 6 spot.
It's going to be a very loaded position group. Competition is going to be extensive there as the Broncos tried to build the best 53-man roster they can going into 2024. We saw the Broncos really kind of build their 2024 roster by solidifying Quinn Miners to a big-time contract extension. Which Broncos player could be the next in line for an extension either before, during the season, or in the offseason? We'll break down the Broncos' biggest priorities here on today's episode of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, at FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook. And even though there aren't a lot of sports that are going on right now, FanDuel lets you stay involved in the world of sports. I love sports so much, I never want them to stop. I know you feel the same exact way, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and there are less and less action on the television. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. One thing I always do right before the NFL season begins, I go in and I do NFL futures. I go ahead and I go through and select who I think will win Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, MVP. I like to do that ahead of time at FanDuel Sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel, they are hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Quinn Miners got the bag for the Broncos offense as they've looked to establish continuity on the offensive line. But as the Broncos approach the 2024 NFL season, you don't want to look too far ahead to 2025, but the Broncos have several key players who are set to become unrestricted free agents. What is now the biggest priority for the Broncos when you look at potential extension candidates in season and potentially in the offseason? We'll break it all down here on today's episode of the show. Real quick, I want to say thank you once again, Broncos Country, for hanging out with us, making us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much here, Sayre. I mean, obviously, I think it was big news. We didn't get a chance to get your reaction to the Quinn Miners contract extension when we did the emergency episode. Want to get your quick thoughts on that and also kind of more so expand on, all right, hey, what's next? Like, who is the Broncos' biggest priority? I think everyone's going to be in agreement on that one, but your thoughts quickly on the Quinn Miners deal.
Yeah, my first thought was, man, time flies. Actually, I texted you as you called me. I was not at my house, and you called me, and I was like, oh no, what happened? You know, something Broncos happens. Anytime Cody calls me, I'm like, uh-oh, something Broncos happened. And he said Quinn Miners, and I was like, oh my gosh, Quinn Miners got hurt in the offseason. Like, what the heck happened? But no, when you find out he got the bag, got the $80 million, obviously you feel like time has really flown by since he got drafted. I still feel like his draft was just the other day. And not only that, but he's one of only 3 players on this Broncos roster to get paid at or above market value at their position group that was drafted by the team. So I'm talking Garrett Bowles, Courtland Sutton, and now Quinn Miners. That's very staggering because, you know, Justin Simmons is gone. A number of other Broncos guys that have gotten drafted and paid are no longer in Denver. But, man, it's great to see a homegrown talent finally getting paid. And we do believe that is going to happen in probably the pretty near future for Pat Surtain as well, who's kind of the low-hanging fruit in terms of which player is going to be extended next by the Denver Broncos. I think Pat Surtain, although it feels like because it's a massive contract, it feels like it should be more complicated. It's actually probably going to be pretty straightforward based on where the market is currently at.
Well, and that's good, as you wanted to get ahead of that, right? Because I think in free agency this year, we were seeing some of the offensive lineman contracts like, oh, man, like Denver, they're going to have to feel like better hope that it doesn't get even bigger. Like Quinn is deserving of the contract, obviously. But financially, you know, with where Denver's at, the moves that they've had to make, obviously the release of Justin Simmons this offseason, I think a lot of us were wondering, are they going to take care of guys in-house? Quinn Miners a big priority for them. So now that begs the question, who's next? And I think, Sayre, you and I might be unanimous in this decision. Obviously, you can answer for it. But I feel like PS2 is now, all eyes are on PS2 as the next guy that the Broncos will prioritize to extend. Now, part of me is wondering because we anticipate Pat's contract, if he and when he gets it, we expect it to reset the cornerback market significantly. And then I guess, you're going to factor in Sauce Gardner maybe in a couple of years. They're going to try to top that. In your opinion, is it PS2 or bust as like the top priority, or are there some other names that Denver should look to get a deal with done sooner rather than later?
Well, I think just because kind of where that market is for either the top corner or non-quarterbacks right now with what Justin Jefferson's getting. I mean, Pat Surtain could be in that conversation as well in terms of what teams would be willing to pay him. And so the Broncos are going to have to pay top dollar, 30 million plus probably annual value on that contract. He's got the 19.2 million counting against the cap next year as his 5th-year option. And so that's the reason to extend him now. And that's why I feel like he is kind of that no-brainer now, because you want to get that 19.2 million. You want to knock that down as far as you possibly can next year and start the extension as of 2026, right? So PS2 is going to get his guaranteed money up front. He's going to get 100+ million guaranteed. Obviously, that's no question about that. My guess is somewhere like the 5-year, $150 million or so, something like that. 5 years, 150, 160. And I don't know how much of that's going to be guaranteed. A lot, probably over 100 million in my opinion. So we'll see, but he's going to get an unprecedented amount of cash at the cornerback position. And I think that just because of where things are with other players around the league, it does make it a little bit more straightforward for the Broncos to get that deal done, because the other guys that I have on my list would be like Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning, who are not as straightforward. Like those guys they've shown a lot of potential. They've shown that they can start. They've shown that they can really play at a high level. Have we seen it consistently over time? And that's what we've seen from Quinn Miners. That's what we've seen from Pat Surtain. These other guys, like Cooper, is coming off a breakout year. He showed glimpses before that. Baron Browning has really only shown us glimpses, but those guys are both in contract years. Do you feel like an offseason extension before they hit free agency is the answer, or do you wait until in season or after 2024?
Yeah, see, this is a great question. I mean, ideally, if you know that the market value for them in terms of their production at edge rusher, you're going to get something that's equity, in terms of you as the team, but also the players are getting something that's fair to where they're at, their potential. And also it's, you're kind of paying, okay, this is what you've done, but we're also going to pay you a little bit on what we think you can do. If Jonathan Cooper has another big year this year and Baron Browning becomes the guy that we think he can be, I think you have to get a contract done after the season. You have to evaluate your options here, because you drafted Jonah Ellis 76th overall, and we're going to see what he could bring to the table this year. Nick Bonito broke out in a big-time way last season. It's kind of like, hey, like we're monitoring the situation, but we also have our eye on the future here a little bit with these two guys. And look, there could be a situation where the Broncos retain one of those guys and let somebody else walk. That could be a very realistic scenario. Or it's like, hey, we know two guys just can't get it done at edge rusher. You need to have a little bit of a platoon. You need to have a first wave. You need to have a second wave at the outside linebacker position. It's hard to come into guys like Von Miller. Look, Denver was fortunate enough to have that. They're fortunate enough to have Bradley Chubb when they did in terms of his rookie impact. The ACL, maybe we could argue, changed a little bit of the trajectory on terms of where that was going to go here for the Broncos. But I do think now in today's game, you have to have a really good core four of pass rushers here. And Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, in my opinion, would be fantastic market value extensions here for Denver. To me, that's going to be the challenge, is figuring out, should it be in season? Should it be after the season? If I had to guess today, I would say that's probably going to come. One of those guys will be in season. One of them will be in the off season.
And I would say, and I agree with you on that, I'd say Jonathan Cooper is the in-season guy and Baron Browning is the after-the-season guy to me.
Yeah.
Because you want to see Baron not just produce over the course of a full season, but like actually play for a full season, right? Because he only played 10 games last year. He was injured the year before, injured his rookie year. So a lot of injury history there, preventing the certainty that comes with guaranteed money on a new contract, which I think he could get on a new deal after this year, especially if Baron to me is one of those types of guys that the variance in what he could become after this year is massive. He could be signing a 1-year, $3 or $4 million deal as a prove it player next offseason outside of Denver, or he could be getting franchise tagged by the Broncos. I mean, I think there's such a variance level with him. With Jonathan Cooper, when you start to see that consistency again at the beginning of the season, and he proves like, not only can I be consistent, but I can even get a little bit better than I was last year. I think you slap that 3-year, $24 million or something like that, throw that his direction and give him that extension, or 4 years, $32 million, whatever, at $8 million a year or something like that sounds about right for him. And to me, that would be a great value, because you're getting a player who's productive, who starts at only $8 million a year off the edge. Then you could focus on, all right, what do we got to give Benito now? Do we have to tag Browning? Like all these other things, it just solidifies an important position. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. Even Garrett Bowles, we haven't mentioned yet. He could be an extension candidate, but at the same time, I think you want to take care of those in-house players. I thought about, after Quinn was signed, Cody, remember George Paton, his introductory press conference, he talked about it. I want to draft guys, I want to develop them, and I want to re-sign them. This is the first evidence of that happening. And the guys that we talked about, PS2, Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, that would be the next in line from his very first draft class.
You make some very valid points there, Sayre. And look, Broncos Country, we're eager for your thoughts. As always, want to say thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us as we break down more Broncos news. And to recap today's show, we analyze whether or not the Broncos should be in the trade market for Brandon Aiyuk. What are some of the storylines for Broncos training camp as rookies and QBs have reported, and which player could be the next extension here for the franchise? We broke all that down. And for all you everydayers, we'll be back tomorrow for another episode of the shows. We do a little bit of a health deep dive. Which players need some time, in our opinion, going into training camp in the preseason? Which players should be ready to go? We'll break all that down and much more in tomorrow's brand new episode of the show.